Hello and welcome to a new video. For today, it's a little update about my goals. So I'm going to tell you what my Q1 looked like. And yes, so let's get started. Hello, back office Becky here. I realized that I didn't record my screen with my goals on it, and also if it doesn't completely match with the speed, I'm sorry, I had to re-record it. So, yes. So, for the first point, like always, my focus language. And at the moment, it hasn't changed anything about my focus language. My main focus is June is Japanese, and then we'll slowly change to Spanish for the first focus language. And for the second, I have Spanish in the first quarter. And you see my little experiment next month. So I'm starting it basically right now. While I'm recording this, I actually already started it. So today is the 3rd of April. So I'm already on the experiment, and you will see in my next video what is it about. But yes, so that's still the same. Third quarter, Spanish the second focus language. And for the fourth quarter, it's Spanish the first main, and Japanese the second. So far, so good. And that's all about focus languages, and I think we will continue to move on to my Japanese goals. My first goal for Japanese for this year was to listen to Japanese for another 150 hours. I managed to listen for 44 hours and 16 minutes in the first quarter, mostly podcasts and movies and animes and so on. And also a great part in the listening had solo leveling. I watched all of the episodes in Japanese because why not? So we have like a really good start in the listening goal. And yes, then let's move on to the second goal. That was studying Japanese for 250 hours, including the 150 hours of listening. And I managed to study for 67 hours and 35 minutes. And that's also a good dent in the goal and and all on track. Then the next one was I wanted to try to read two books in Japanese, and I actually haven't started that yet. I tried to read a book, but I was like after the first two sentences or so, I was just like, I kind of don't have the nerve right now. So I will probably start with my first book this year. We will see how fast I can read and how fast I complete the first book. And then we will see if I read the second one. But anyway, then the last mini goal is not yet relevant. It's only relevant in June and July. So um, I wanted to try to speak with native in Japan, and because I'm not yet in Japan and my trip is only in June and July, it's not it hasn't happened yet. So that's all for Japanese, and we move on to Spanish. For Spanish, I had the same approach as for Japanese. I try to focus more on time-based goals so I can actually track them. I had the same goal for Spanish as for Japanese to listen another 150 hours in 2024. I actually only listened to 70 hours and 48 minutes yet, so I'm way beyond. Well, half of the amount I should have if you see the whole 150 and split it into quarters. But because Spanish isn't my main focus in the first quarter, or wasn't the main focus in the first quarter, it's actually not that bad. But we will see if I can do a little bit more in Q2. Well, I also had for Spanish the same goal as for Japanese in study hour wise. Well, not the same, but I set a number of hours I want to study Spanish in 2024. So I set the total number to 200 hours, and that also including likewise, or like in Japanese, the 150 hours of listening. And for the for the 200, not the 400, for 200 hours to be reached in total for the whole year, it would mean 50 hours per quarter. But as I mentioned, Spanish isn't my focus language, so I'm not that unhappy that I reached 24 hours and 28 minutes. Well, it's still a bit lower than I expected, but we're working with that. And the third goal in Spanish was also book related. So I wanted to read two books in Spanish this year. I actually started with one, and read I only read like half of it because I found it too boring. So I stopped halfway through and didn't continue with it, and I will see if I find another book that's more interesting and that I read. But Spanish, it's kind of weird reading in Spanish because I have books that are really complicated in Spanish or not that easygoing like child's books or something. No, there are real adult books like thriller and so horror. Um, and they're not, or for me, they're not um, hard to read. They're quite simple. Maybe because I read that genre the most, but they're quite simple for me to read. But I tried to read what was it? A book for young adults, or was it still for kids or teenager? I'm not sure, but it was a book from that should be from the level below the thriller that I normally read, but it was way too hard. So I was like, I don't understand what they are trying to say. Maybe it's also that that book wasn't in my genre, so I it wasn't as interesting as the thriller books. Well, anyway, I will try to find another Spanish book and try to read it. And then we have finished our Spanish goals and we are moving on to my English goals. So for English, I had only two goals. The first one was to read four books again, and let me think. no, I haven't started with it yet. So I haven't read English book. Well, I think I mentioned that before. I read English content, but not book-wise. I like to read fan fiction and so, but that's not really a book, so you can't really measure it. Well, of course you can measure it and say you have read a fan fiction, but there are fan fictions that are only one page, and then there are like fan fictions that have like 100 chapters or even more and have like over 1,000 sites, 1,000 pages. And so it's not really measurable. So that doesn't count. But I have read a good amount of fan fiction. And also, I don't count the fan fiction into my reading. And tracker wise. But what I did read is well, what I started, I haven't finished yet, is a book called Rust book. It's about a programming language, so we're getting a bit nerdy, and I'm reading that, and I haven't finished it yet, so yes. But I lied as I told as I said earlier, I haven't read an English book. I am reading one right now, so yes. And the second goal was to study every month at least once. And by studying, I mean not read a book without any challenging, but something I track. And I only track things. If I read a boring book or a just English book that has nothing new for me, then I don't track it. So that's my definition. If I track it, then it's studying time. If I don't track it, then it's fun time and it doesn't count. But anyway, and so far I did reach that. I did study all 3 months a little bit I think in every week. Yes, I every week I did a little bit of English, so that's also good. And yes, so that's it for English. And we're moving on to German. And German is new this year. I didn't have German goals in last year's plan or video. Well, I have one, or I set one goal to read more books. So I wanted to read 10 books. Well, I actually did read, I think, let me count, 3 books? I think 3. I'm not sure about the last one. Two, I'm sure about the two. So 2 by all, definitely. And with one, I'm not sure. I would have to look it up again. So I just looked it up. I only read 2. The first one was my kind of favorite book, and I read it like 4 times a year. No, that's over the top. But like 1 or 2 times every year I read it. It's called Spiel unter Freunden. It's a thriller, and it's from the Monkey Ranch series. So in English it's just Monkey Ranch Monkey Ranch 1, I think. And I read that, and then I read the first part of the Robert Langton romance. I think they're rom. I think they're. Hmm. Hmm. Maybe I'm just saying wrong things. But anyway, I read the first part of the Robert Langton series, and in German it's called Illuminati. In English it's called Angels and Demons. So it's quite a difference. And the third book that I wasn't sure about it was the second part of this series from the Robert Langdon series because I prepared it so that I can take it with me to read, but I didn't actually read it. So my bookmark is still on the front, like not read yet. But anyway, so we have two books. And yeah, so far that's fine because we have 10 books. That's like two books, not not a total of two books, but two books a month, plus or minus. And well, I try to read some books very fast. But anyway, uh, we have two books out of 10. So continue with the second goal. And the second goal was to read a few pages a day or every other day. Well, that didn't quite happen. I read a few pages every day, but not in German. So I was reading a few in English, a few in German, but the most of them were in English in my Rust book. And there were like a few pages because I like read it before going to bed, and most of the time I was exhausting from work, so I was like after a few pages not able to focus anymore on the book. But anyway, so the second German goal didn't happen quite as I planned it, so I will probably work on that again to read a few pages in German every day. And it actually I did manage to do it like 2 weeks in a row, like every day, a few pages. And that was as I was reading the Robert Langton book. And for the Spiel unter Freunden, ne? So for the Monkey Ranch book, I actually that didn't happen because I like finished it in a day or two. That's me. But anyway, so far so good for the German goals, and yeah, that's all. I can give you the total number I've studied all of my languages, and that is 112 hours and 15 and 14 minutes. Well, I just took a few seconds and added them on top. We're at 14 minutes. And yes, so that's all for today. And that's kind of Q1 in numbers, if you want so. And yes, so if you're interested in seeing my progress, or if you are interested in my little projects, and so let me know. And if you like my goal updates or something like it, feel free to give it a like. And for more videos in the future, feel free to subscribe. And I will see you next time.